says behind me, my title today is student entrepreneur. So it would be pretty logical to assume that today I'd be talking to you about entrepreneurship, right? Maybe what I have to share is that one secret thing you need to do to ensure that your venture will be a success. But I mean, let's be honest, if I knew that, I probably wouldn't be standing here. I'd be out there launching a lot of successful companies and totally changing the world. To be honest, what I really want to share with you guys today is why it's so hard for me to call myself an entrepreneur. Because growing up, I had this weird misconception about what an entrepreneur was, and I also had a very set idea of the person that I thought I was going to become. Much like the way that this man is actively pulling against the direction where his dog wants to go, I had a phenomenal number of opportunities pushing me in one direction that I tried really hard to fight against. And that just happened to be pursuing entrepreneurship. So for context, when I came into my first year of university, I was a part of the Startup Summit team. We facilitated an entrepreneurship event. So naturally, when I told my friends about it, I said, yeah, it was really fun. I love to facilitate entrepreneurship, but I could totally never do that. No. Flash forward to the summer, I was working at the Center for Social Innovation. It's a great place, and they do a lot of great events. One event was so cool that I wanted to bring it back to the university. I knew that I would need funding and support, so I pitched it to the Innovation Connector. They gave me funding and support, and I launched a failed event. But it made them really encourage me to take part in the Summer Incubator Program, QICSI. This program's awesome. You literally get paid to start your own company. I mean, you'd have to be crazy to not want to do something like that, right? Guess he's crazy. I thought that it was going to be too hard, that I wouldn't be good enough, and that absolutely not. No, I couldn't be an entrepreneur. But I ended up taking that opportunity, and here I am today. So it was really, really tough for me to reinvent the way that I saw myself. It was really tough for me to change. I mean, change is hard for everybody, but it's also really important. And ultimately, it's something that we can't avoid. We will have to change throughout our lives. So how do we stay open to new ideas? How do we not have blinders on so much so that we can miss out on these incredible opportunities that are just on the periphery of our vision, or maybe the edge of our comfort zone? Now, you need to be open to new ideas. You have to be open to new thoughts, and kudos if you're listening to a talk like this. If you're here today, you're already forcing yourself to be open to new things. But what can you do to make sure that you're able to reinvent yourself when the time comes, or that you don't miss out on a potentially phenomenal and enriching opportunity? How do you avoid getting so stuck in your ways that you won't change, and you won't change who you are, you won't listen to logical reasoning? How can you make sure that you can still be open to change? Well, I don't actually totally know. I'm not a psychologist, I'm a student entrepreneur, remember? I don't really know the answer to this question, but I've had a lot of people help me out along the way. And I actually grew up with a pseudo-psychologist, my mom. So growing up as my mother's second major experiment, because my older brother was actually her first, meant a couple of things. So in our house, we didn't have any video games, but we did a lot of reading. I read a lot of books. And we used our words, not our bodies, to fight. We were always encouraged to discuss our feelings, really explore them. And another thing that was always really important, and my mom told me a lot growing up, was how important our formative development years were. You know, the late teens, early 20s. How important it was to take advantage of new opportunities, try new things, to make independent decisions. So, growing up, this is super embarrassing, but I thought that this was my mom's way of making sure I wouldn't fall head over heels for somebody, let them make all my major life choices for me, and not be independent, and not stand on my own. I was totally wrong. Turns out Mom had a real point, and her argument is founded in science. You see, you may have noticed that car rental companies will treat you differently until about the age of 25. And as the MIT Youth Development Project points out, they have a very good reason for doing so. because our brain is undergoing some substantial changes through our adolescence into adulthood. This growth starts near the back of the brain. The cortex ends up near our frontal lobe. One key area is our prefrontal cortex. That's responsible for things like complex reasoning, impulse control, logical planning, and even our personality and our perception of self. So yes, your perception of who you are in this world is actually changing. It's malleable through that sort of late teens, early 20s period. There are other studies that tell us that the more stimulation a brain has as it's developing, the stronger the neural pathways become. I am not a psychologist, I am not a scientist, but what I take away from that is that it's important to have a lot of different experiences. And the more experiences that we can have, particularly around this stage, the better prepared we will be to process information as we continue to live our lives. And all this changing and all this growth is pretty intuitive. I mean, if I think back to how much 4 years has shaped my life, there's a lot of changes that we all undergo. And if I think about the next 4 years, I have no idea what's really in store. But of course, you don't just magically stop changing after the age of 25. That's ridiculous. I mean, change is going to happen inevitably to you throughout the rest of your life. It can come in so many different ways, and that whole thing rings true that you need to stay open to new opportunities. Don't put blinders on. Notice things around you. So yeah, that's important, right? Cool. So what? So what? Well, what's interesting is how people can define themselves not by what they are, but by what they're not. So maybe it's that you don't run, so you won't join a Run for the Cure with your friends. Maybe you don't sing, so you never join in the national anthem at a sports game. You always mouth the words. Maybe you're not technical, so you could never learn how to program a computer. Isn't this a little bit backwards? I mean, especially around this stage? If science is telling us that your brain is still changing and you're still growing into that person you will one day become, who are you to decide what you are capable of and what you're not capable of? What's that thing for you? For me, obviously, one of the things that I thought I couldn't be was an entrepreneur. Because you see, entrepreneurs were guys who invented stuff in their basements or in their garage. They were completely overconfident. They had all the answers. I'm not that. Not at all. And 2 years ago, in a group of people much like this, if the group was asked for people to raise their hands if they wanted to start their own company one day, I wouldn't have raised my hand. I've gone through a few changes, but all these changes, while I've reinvented the perception of who I am, it's pretty aligned with who I've kind of always wanted to become. Because you see, when I was 6, I decided that I wanted to work really hard to make the world a better place. And entrepreneurship is one of the paths you can do that. It's not the only one, though. And this notion that people have some sort of idea of the person they want to become or the life that they hope to lead, I think would resonate with many people, even if it wasn't something that you've been thinking about since you were 6. So if you have this sort of idea of the person you want to grow into, how do you get there? I think it might be through trial and error. You have to try a lot of different things. Some things you might like, others you might not. Some you might find success in, others you'll fail. And how the heck are you supposed to be able to walk into a situation where you've got a high chance of failure? That's pretty hard for anybody to do. That might require you to totally change your mindset. How do you do that? How do you change the way that you think about a situation? You might need to rely on your best resource. This is a resource which is super obvious, but maybe counterintuitive, because it's actually you. Yeah, think about it, right? I mean, what's the one guarantee that you have in your life? You know that you'll always be with yourself, right? And this has been true for years. But our world has changed a lot over the past few years. And statistics say that on average, every person in this room uses about 3 mobile devices. If you have a smartphone, you're probably checking that phone about 150 times a day. You maybe even check your phone more than 150 times a day. We're drowning in all this information, and it can make us lose sight of our biggest resource and our only constant, and that's ourselves. This may come as the world's worst PSA, but at the end of the day, you're really all you've got. No matter where you go, what you do, who you're with, take comfort in knowing that you'll be with yourself. This is why we are our biggest asset. We can also be our own worst enemy. Think about all the times that you've held yourself back. So I almost held myself back when I had this phenomenal opportunity to join the Queen's Incubator. And had I done that, I wouldn't have walked in on the first day and met these amazing guys with whom I founded my first company, Mosaic. I also would not be founding my second company, and I definitely wouldn't be standing here today. But I almost wasn't, because it was too hard for me to picture myself in that way. And as I've said before, I still honestly find it really hard to call myself an entrepreneur. But while this is a really exciting chapter of my life, it might not necessarily be the entire story. Think about it. If you're in your 20s, statistically, you will live well into your 80s. If this is the game of life, we're literally playing in the first quarter. We're in the warm-ups for our career. Who knows what will happen? Who knows where exactly everyone's gonna end up? It's really exciting. It's also really overwhelming. And at times, I know that I've felt paralyzed by fear of all these different decisions, and I haven't really known how to understand what I should do or how I should approach the situation. And unknowingly, a habit I picked up a long time ago has been a huge help for me to better understand my thinking and make more informed decisions. I write. I journal. Actually, in 6th grade, I decided that I should start writing Dear Diary every night, because that was just like an important thing to do. And that's since become a habit. But honestly, it helps me so much, especially when it comes to making a decision. For example, the decision to join that incubator program. In writing down what was bothering me, I was able to realize that it wasn't my peers saying I should be in a bigger city, have a more corporate job. That was a better call. No, that wasn't what was bothering me. I was scared. I was scared of doing something outside my comfort zone. I didn't really know what to expect, and I found that hard. In writing it down, it made it a lot more clear for me to understand that this was a good opportunity for me to pursue. So it's a tool that I found to be really helpful. And it would be ridiculous for me to say that we don't all have this preconceived notion of who we are. You have some sort of thought process of where you're headed. I mean, I work as a tour guide, so I literally meet high school students all the time who know exactly what kind of program they should do and where exactly they're gonna head with their life, and ultimately, that will change. It's inevitable. You won't be surprised to know that the typical length of a career in an organization is much shorter today than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. People sitting in this room are gonna be having to try a lot of different things, try out a lot of different industries, and consistently be reinventing themselves. For those of us who've got our youth to blame, I mean, look, science is telling you that your brain's still developing, your perception of yourself is malleable, and you also have all this time. You can try out a lot of things, and regardless of what happens, you were young. I mean, you were getting life experience. Isn't that awesome? But 20 years down the road, when you're further along in life, you will still need to be reinventing yourself. It might look a little bit different, but it's still going to happen. I kind of stumbled into figuring out that entrepreneurship was a good path for me. Okay, I didn't really stumble. I actively fought against going into entrepreneurship because I thought it wasn't for me. And I had so much support and great people around me, awesome opportunities, and objectively, a lot of good luck, chance. You don't need chance. It can be a choice for you. You can design your life in such a way that you are more open to reinvention. What if you don't put blinders on? You don't get so focused on one path or one singular definition of who you are, so that you can be open to these cool opportunities on the periphery and even have the courage to pursue those opportunities. What if you stop defining yourself by what you're not? Because you can hold yourself back more than anybody else. And at those really difficult moments of major decisions, when you feel overwhelmed and that dog is yanking you in a weird direction that you're not really sure you want to head in, what if you can take the time and make an effort to write down your thoughts to better understand where you're at, make a more informed decision? Design your life for continuous reinvention. Every person has a different path, different things will happen to you, you will face different challenges. We will all end up somewhere. And regardless of where your path takes you, I just hope that you have a few less bumps than I've had over the past year and a half. Thank you so much.